Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I'm going to be ranking all of the Endwalker extreme difficulty trials from my least favorite to my most favorite. Now we have all of the trials that we need to unlock the final super mount, so it seemed like a fitting time to release this. Bear in mind there is one more trial due out after this video releases in the form of the Asura trial. We don't know exactly when that's going to release, sometime after the JP FanFest is all we know, and as far as we're aware, it is just going to be a normal mode, trial, like the easy mode stuff serving whatever purpose, just to make sure we can play what they played at FanFest. If they give us an extreme version, which I sincerely doubt they will, then I guess I need to remake this video, but I am assuming there won't be. So with that, I suppose we should just get into the list. Before we get started though, this video has a sponsor, Honkai Star Rail. I'm sure you all know this game already, but bear with me here. It's a multi-platform space fantasy RPG from Hoyoverse, the makers of Genshin Impact. It has fantastic turn-based combat, a large semi-open world to explore with treasures hidden all throughout, and plenty of characters to recruit and interact with throughout its ever-expanding story. The latest update, version 1.4, comes packed with a bunch of new content. The all-new story content returning to planet Belobog, new areas on that planet, and this Ethereum Wars content where you actually recruit monsters to fight against other monsters. You can also recruit some new characters in that of Jingliu, the legendary hero who utilizes ice for a limited time. I've got a soft spot for individuals like that. And the power-packed duo of Topaz and Nummy who team up to deal fire damage to their opponents. As a cat owner, I kind of think Nummy is cute. This patch also coincides with the game's PlayStation 5 debut. Thanks to its cross-platform data syncing, you can continue a previous adventure on the comfort of your couch, back at your PC, or on the go on your mobile device and never miss a beat. Now try Honkai Star Rail today using the download link below and use these redemption codes to gain 50 bonus Stellar Jade. I'll also include these in the description of the video. The redemption codes only work for a limited time, so be sure to grab them while you can. You can also get 10 free Star Rail special passes by logging in for 7 days, and you can use those to try to roll on the characters we were just talking about, so I'd hop to it. So use that download link in the description to support the channel directly and start your adventure today. With that, let's get to the video. Alright, so let's start this list off at the bottom. What is my least favorite extreme trial in Endwalker? Well, my answer, I think a lot of people can already guess, and it's really unfortunate that of all the bosses, it had to be this one. My least favorite trial in Endwalker for extremes is Endsinger itself. I mean, this was just a huge disappointment, this fight for me as a whole. I almost always look forward to the Point 1 extreme as one of my personal favorites, like looking back at Shinryu, looking back at Ultima, looking back at even Thornton, who on content didn't annoy me quite as much as he does nowadays after DSR. But I loved all of those extreme trials, even though they had, ups and downs, because I was most of the time, best in slot gear by the time they came out, which means they overscale it a bit. So it should actually mess with my perception. I don't feel like that was the case here. I think that at its core, Endsinger just didn't do a whole lot. It had one really cool concept in that of kind of forcing you to remember the order of the abilities you were hit by, and then everyone having to position for a follow-up AoE based on, whether it was the first, second, or third AoE pattern that you were following for one of the heads around the arena, or on you yourself for like the stack and spread and all that. But at its core, it's just such a slow and uninteresting encounter. The single most threatening thing about it ends up being taking a knockback and then needing to avoid a point-blank AoE after the knockback. That was where almost everyone wiped, because then there's an 8-player body check that comes right after it in the later section of the encounter. And that's like the most memorable thing. The rings that get sent out at the heads and, they do AoEs, you need to find the safe spot, plus the planets colliding for the knockback point blank. Like, there was nothing that to me screamed, oh, I can identify this boss by this one thing, except for the ordered thing, and the ordered thing just wasn't very interesting. So this didn't even come down to, oh, I outscaled it, and thus, it was boring because I had so much gear. I wish that was the case. It was just not fun. And like, even the music, like I don't dislike the music, but it would just lost a lot of the gravitas the MSQ gave the boss in favor of making the extreme trial. Whereas I feel like with other 0.1 extremes, they did a really good job of kind of building that up and making it even more grand. At least for me, they managed to achieve that. So Endsinger, you're stuck all the way at the bottom. I'm glad I don't need to go back and get your mount because I'm already way done with that. Moving on to number 6. Now, this is gonna have to be Rubicante. You know, I didn't actually mind farming Rubicante, but it's the same reason that I didn't mind farming it for the mount is the reason why it's kind of number 6, in that about 60 to 65% of the fight is really that fuse mechanic where you have to, watch him light the fuse and you have to make sure you're standing in the right spot. And once you learn what all the patterns look like and you can identify it at a glance, then again, that mechanic becomes kind of a nothing burger. And that's just so much of the fight. It's unfortunate because the other approximately 1/3 of the fight is actually pretty decent. It's very execution heavy, a lot of ways to make mistakes, a lot of funny ways for groups to perish due to mispositioning. And if there had been more of that in the fight, then I think it would have been a better fight overall. Not to mention that this one actually does have the problem about scaling it, where people were just really bad at the very last mechanic, the limit cut style mechanic, because they just saw it so infrequently. Most people just kind of banked that you would skip it and then kind of understood how it worked in case their party finder actually reached that. So it was like 50-50 whether or not people even needed to be practiced on it in the first place. But those fuse mechanics are just so slow and uninteresting that they knocked this fight down that far on that alone. The only reason Endsinger is really any lower is because, again, I feel like it came with that added expectation of being a 0.1 patch extreme trial and disappointed on that level even more. It's not necessarily a horrible fight, but really wasn't to my taste because the fuse thing was just too easy to solve because it's an extreme trial. So Rubicante, I wish more than a third of your fight was good, but that's what landed you here at number 6. Now, from number 5 upward, I actually have a lot of positives to say, and it's kind of just me ranking the ones I like least. 7 and 6 were really the ones I kind of don't like and needed to differentiate them. 5 and up, I kind of like the rest of the Endwalker trials for a bunch of different reasons, and I have farmed all of them to their mount completion, except for Golbez, so I'm at 130-something kills of now without getting the mount to outright drop. So number 5 for me is going to be Zodiark. Now, it's a pretty decent spot to land at number 5 for a start of the expansion trial, because those ones are normally anywhere from the coolest to really disappointing. And I think they actually did a good job on both of them. Zodiark is really a fight that is all about arena manipulation, the turning, the looking at the meteors as they come crashing down, understanding how the snake adds work, the behemoth adds. It's really just a full-on understanding of every core aspect of the fight in the arena and the way that it's used. And I think when you do wall bosses like that, that is what can make a wall boss be not a bad design by default. Now, Zodiark really lands at number 5 because being a start of the expansion trial, it was an incredibly simple one to solve. So much so that the Danger Dorito ended up being the go-to strat. Now, this is something you could also experience for Rubicante and Endsinger, and realistically in a lot of extreme trials, but I've never seen something so prominent as it was with Zodiark, where people could literally just full-on trust in a person and learn absolutely nothing about how the fight works at all, and still pretty much be able to scrap through it until the end without much of an issue. So as fun as I think Zodiark is, I love the background music. I love having the voiceovers. That always does a lot for me when it comes to farming extreme trials. None of that was enough to redeem Zodiark mechanically compared to the other 4 spots on this list. So if it had released later in the expansion, I feel like we probably would have gotten something that would have ranked higher. But for now, this is what we've gotten. I'm okay with it, but it's landing on number 5. Now for number 4, we're actually going to jump to the end of the expansion because that's going to be our most recent extreme trial, Zeramis. Now I fought back and forth about Zodiark and Zeramis, and realistically, having some recency bias, I think that kind of made me lean towards Zeramis a bit. But Zeramis was a fight where I was kind of disappointed upon the initial clear, and then as I cleared it more, I actually grew to like it more and more for a lot of the same reasons I listed with Zodiark. There's a lot of understanding how the arena works, and you are rewarded for that. You can make the fight safer, you can make saving the fight a lot better as well. And you can still kind of danger Dorito through it, but more people need to kind of understand where to go than just the individual person. Not to mention there's a lot of personal responsibility here, things like avoiding the poison bubbles, and again, understanding how the different spots work whenever you have to do the claw mechanic. And then there's, of course, the meteors, which is not even really a body check so much as a, one person could completely wipe this for everyone check if they do it wrong. And so it has just that little bit of an edge over Zodiark for me. I also, again, love the theme, which as much as it is a remix of the Final Fantasy IV theme, someone pointed out to me that it sounds like a Pokemon theme, and now I can't unhear that because of the instrumentation, the more kind of EDM, old school music feel that they go for here. I think it kind of leans towards it, the instrument choice and the kind of synth effects that they go to use. Definitely like a mid-gen Pokemon kind of vibe going on with that one. But all the same, this one just ticks a lot of boxes for me as well, and I like it just a smidge more than Zodiark, so it's ending up at number 4. Now, my top 3, I feel like, are way above 4 and 5, and my number 3 is actually going to be Hydaelyn. This was a really, really impressive and unique extreme trial for the start of the expansion. This one really feels like they pulled no punches, even though it wasn't like hyper difficult. It just throws a lot of ideas at the player that are not immediately recognizable. I mean, the ad phase as a whole, where you have to be, kiting the ads around and dealing with the meteors at the same time. Tanks are taking autos. It's a pretty tight check in order to get through those first few meteors in a reasonable speed. It's more interesting than most of the other ad phases we tend to get, and definitely stands out amongst all of the enemies on this list, all of the bosses on this list. In fact, that might be the best ad phase of the entire expansion. The only reason it kind of doesn't end up at 1 or 2 is because I don't find any of those particular elements impressive enough on an execution and repeatability factor. Repeating Hydaelyn multiple times for me, as a kind of like a reverse of Zeramis, kind of degrade my desire to do it more. Whereas with Zeramis, I just kind of enjoyed it equally the whole way through, but it kind of had like that initial rise in interest as I started doing it more and more. But I mean, between the final phase with all of the different like rotations, like her firing the conal AoEs and then them traveling back through and you needing to rotate to find the correct spots properly. Not to mention, the piss wave mechanics towards the end of the fight, which always had that little bit of added stress with interpreting the right one and knowing where to move and trying not to get caught out and still needing to do the stacks and spreads and the different forms that Hydaelyn could take, which are familiar to the Shiva encounter, but kind of feel a little bit more stressful here, a little bit more modern and brought up into the current age. She just does a lot of things right. There's very few things that the big thing is I can't really name anything that Hydaelyn fight does wrong. It's just not scaled super tight again because it's the start of the expansion. So easy number 3, and I wouldn't be surprised to see people put this higher up, in their 1 or 2 spot, because I think it's a ultimately really well-crafted extreme trial. Now, going up to number 2 is going to be Golbez. Now, I really fought between Hydaelyn and Golbez for 2 and 3 because Golbez is, unlike Hydaelyn, I feel like a lot more traditional, if that makes sense. There's nothing that really happens that makes me go, oh my God, that's so cool for an extreme trial that they did that. But it is a really solid, fun, and fast-flowing execution-based encounter. And having recently done it another, 80-ish times in the last few days to get my last mount, I've really noticed that more and more. There are a couple of body checks where if somebody's missing, things can really fall apart, but each and every mechanic just kind of happens, and the next one happens, and the next one happens, and the next one happens. There's very few points where Golbez kind of stops and gives you a breather to get ready for the next thing, and that's true from the very start to the very end. And I kind of like that because he just kind of flows through everything. He does, like most extreme trials, he kind of goes into repeat mode for the last like 20 to 25%. And that kind of, I feel like that's the one point where it slows down a little bit. But I'm glad that they managed to take such an iconic character from the Final Fantasy franchise and really do him justice here with the style of mechanics they go for. Gale Sphere is something that causes nonstop stress, and different patterns can really cause you to get a good cardio workout running around the arena. Not to mention the constant swivels and turns and, positioning based on the direction and the kind of small arena, giving you almost this claustrophobic feel whenever you're trying to make space for certain mechanics. There's just a lot of individual responsibility, but a good amount of coordination with lots of need for things like pair markers, light party markers, all that stuff, that it just feels like if they bump this up a little bit more, they could get to that savage level. If they made more body checks or things more punishing than they even are, outside of the meteors, that this could easily be seen as something that's bumped up. And that to me is the premier extreme trial. When something is that mechanically sound that you could see the bump up to savage kind of just in an instant. But that's number 2. So what am I going to say about number 1? Well, I think very few people surprised, my number 1 is Barbariccia. This is a pure execution-based encounter that is fast, it is frantic, and it is fun. I don't think there's any extreme trial in the game that feels anything like Barbariccia, and that is the true reason why any extreme trial should get number 1. That's not been the case with every expansion. Sometimes it does come down to something more like Golbez, where it's not about one identifying factor, it's about a lot of things coming together very cohesively. Sometimes the identifying factor can actually be a negative for me. Things like Byakko and his flying phase or Suzaku and their dance phase, where I don't really resonate with those long breaks that they have. Whereas with Barbariccia, there are 2 very, very distinct phases between each other. Both of them are very heavy execution, one a little bit slower and more punishing if you screw up one individual element, and one a lot faster and more frantic, but you can make a few mistakes here or there and still kind of pull yourself out of it and manage to stay in the fight. But it's just so fast moving and fun, and there's just constant motion. Take a dash to the face, you got to move for the cleave afterwards. 4 people do that. Are you stacked up with anyone? You got the spreads here, you got AoEs flying in from this direction, that direction. It almost looks like just a normal mode trial that was just given a lot more, speed to it, a lot more acceleration that's thrown on top of it. And quite frankly, all the encounter needed to be, because the normal mode is, oddly enough, one of the best normal mode trials that we've ever had. So just amping up the speed of things and making it more punishing to make mistakes and more exact to actually do the mechanics properly is really all it needed. And it accomplished that with flying colors. This is an extreme trial that I will be comparing things to for years on end, I think, because it's just that good and that fun. It's unfortunately the one extreme trial I got done in 3 kills. I got my mount on the 3rd kill, and this one I still ended up doing it another like 20 to 25 times after that, because when people ask me to do it, I'd just be like, yeah, it was fun. I did it on Black Mage even, because I was like, I gotta see what this is like. And yeah, it's just that much fun. And I'm glad to have an extreme trial like that. And if they want to do more execution-based extreme trials in the future, I hope this is kind of the gold star blueprint that they end up referring back to, because it's number 1 for a reason for me. And that's going to be a wrap for my ranking of the Endwalker Extreme Trials. So thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what your list is in the comment section of the video below and why. Do you disagree with my list in any way? Well, let me know that down there as well. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care.